Brothers, I'm Christopher Gregory Ellis Jr., your Eastern Regional Vice President, and I cannot contain my excitement about this next program. This panel discussion is one that has long been coming, and there's no better place to have it and no better time to have it than right now. What is amazing about our fraternity is that no matter what sector or industry, you can always say, there goes an alpha man. And the sports arena is no different. Our rich legacy includes ultimate competitors like Fritz Pollard, Paul Robeson, Jesse Owens, Lenny Wilkins, just to name a few, as well as brothers who have changed the way we consume sports, like our dearly departed brother, Stuart Scott. Booyah. And today, brothers, we have prominent roles off the field, off the court, in front of the camera, in corner offices, and behind the scenes, leaving their imprint on this multi-billion-dollar industry. Without further ado, brothers, let me introduce our esteemed guests. I'll begin with the brothers that are here on the stage with me. To my left is Brother Luke Fedlam, who is a partner at Porter Wright Law Firm in Columbus, Ohio. Let's give a round of applause for Luke. To my right, the big homie, the big brother, Spring 73, Theta Zeta, Dartmouth College, former Cincinnati Bengal, former vice president of Disney Sports Attractions, and many, many, many more things, Brother Reggie Williams. Joining us remotely, as you can see on your screen, we have the good brother Jason Wright, who is president of the Washington Commanders. Brother Wright. On our center screen, you can see Brother Jay Harris, who is an anchor at ESPN. And live from Cairo, Egypt, we have Brother Victor Williams, the CEO of NBA Africa. Brothers, we heard some powerful words last night from Brother Robert Frederick Smith. And this whole discussion about athletes and empowerment and social justice and economics, cooperative economics is heavy for us. But before we get into the deep stuff, let's talk about little personal stuff. I played basketball at Dartmouth for all 4 years and was the captain. Now, I was not the strongest athlete, but I definitely developed my leadership skills, and that was through the work of Alpha Phi Alpha. So the first question that I want to ask our panelists is, how do you see Alpha and engage in Alpha in your professional world? Let's start with Brother Fedlam here, and then we'll go Brother Williams, and then we'll work our way through the brothers that have joined us virtually. So let's take the first 30 to 60 seconds to answer the question, where you see Alpha in your professional world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brother Ellis. Greetings and good morning, brothers. It's good to see you all. I see Alpha in the work that I get to do every single day. So I'm a partner at a law firm where I lead our firm's sports law practice. I work with individual professional athletes all across the country and around the world, but also have a education company called Anomaly Sports that just focuses on educating and working with teams at the professional level and at the college level now because of name, image, and likeness and all the changes that's coming with that. I get to see Alpha every single day with different organizations that I get to engage with. Some of the parents of my clients, some of the fathers of some of my professional athlete clients and college clients are Alphas. There are professional development coordinators and heads of professional development with different teams that I get to work with. And what it really comes down to is our mission, right? And it was said earlier on the dais in the business session this morning about developing leaders and being able to work with alphas where I can be developed by them, but also have the opportunity to develop leaders in the work that we get to do every single day as well is how you get to see alpha in the work we do every day.
Brother Williams.
Good morning, brothers. Alpha changed my life in a unique way. My brother pledged Alpha at Western Michigan while I was a senior in high school. We're just 11 months to the day apart. And so when I went to Dartmouth, if there had been any other Black fraternity on campus but Alphas, I would not have joined. I would not have been able to join. But because my brother was an Alpha, I was able to join the very first line that ever crossed at Dartmouth College. And for that, I am very proud. Of the 7 brothers before me, they had to go to Boston every week for a year. 3 of them were on the football teams. 2 of them were our starters, Ron and Don Smith. And Ron Smith ended up breaking his leg, and so he couldn't play my senior year. But it was because of those guys that I became more confident in myself. Because when I came out of high school, I was told by Bo Schembechler that I wasn't good enough to be a Wolverine. And I had no college scholarship offers, but a fire was lit in me. And so eventually I became, since the Ivy League was formed in 1954, the only African-American All-American from the Ivy League. Fritz Pollard was the very first All-American, but he played before 1954 when the Ivy League was formed. When I made the leap to the NFL, that's where Alpha really came strong for me. And that is primarily because I played middle linebacker at Dartmouth. I was drafted by the Bengals in the 3rd round. They put me at left outside linebacker. The right outside linebacker hurt his leg, and they were so scared about putting this rookie from the Ivy League into the game that they benched me. They put a middle linebacker, Glenn Cameron, to start out there. And then when he couldn't get the job done, I mean, he just was not able to tackle a guy like Greg Pruitt in the open field. They put me in the game, and I was playing for the very first time at right outside linebacker. And what saved me was the guy that I lined up with was Ken Riley, who is an Alpha from FAMU. He had gone from quarterback to defensive back. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He has 65 interceptions. He's number 5 on the list of all-time interceptions. But when I walked in that huddle for the very first time, he said, Invictus. All right.
Thank you for walking us down that alley. That's impressive. Let's go to virtually Brother Jason Wright, who has a very unique experience. Let's hear how he sees Alpha in his day-to-day. Brother Wright?
Well, much like Brother Williams, I played in the NFL as well. Played for the Falcons, Browns, and Cardinals over the course of 7 years. And during that time, to his point, all that you learn in becoming an alpha man about perseverance and maintaining your confidence when things are facing you, those are critical. In fact, this week, in a challenging week for the business that I lead, I actually sent the poem If to our entire workforce and talked about the depth of its meaning, talked about what it meant to persevere, to keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming on you. And it's meaningful. So it's part of my DNA. But I think beyond that, and importantly, as the first Black person in a president role in the NFL, there's a little bit of a question that sits over my head of, can a Black man with his network bring in sponsorships and business leaders and suite holders at the same level as his white counterparts? And in that, the network of Alpha, connecting me with other leaders who have businesses that can participate with us, that can build our business, shows them that Black economics are powerful as well. And that's especially powerful in a sport where 70% of the men on the field are Black. And so Alpha has come in support of me in my art, and it is coming in support of me in the business that I lead.
Thank you, good brother. Thank you. Thank you. Brother Harris, Brother Jay Harris, tell us about your experience in seeing Alpha in your professional world.
Honestly, I think for me, a lot of it revolves around this guy right here. You mentioned him earlier. When I decided to become an Alpha, when I would watch Stuart work, whether it was on television or in person, it was all about excellence. It was all about making sure his best was on display every day. And that's what I think about every day. And the representation. When people say, hey man, I've grown up watching you, or my son or my daughter wants to do what you do because of you. I think back to Stuart and his excellence, and the excellence that I try and instill every day in my work. And that comes from Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, because that's what I learned from the very beginning.
Thank you, brother. All right, Brother Williams from Cairo, Egypt, so that everybody knows, Brother Williams is in a very unique position, and I believe the NBA Africa season starts in various locations this weekend, and he was dedicated, and we thought it was very, very important that we have somebody from the international district participate in this this panel. So Brother Williams jumped right in and said, plug me in. I won't be able to be there in person, but if we can make it happen and have this bandwidth thing work and this tech can work, I'll join you from Cairo, Egypt. So Brother Williams, tell me about what you see in the fraternity in your professional world.
Thank you, Brother Ellis, and I hope you all can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm speaking from Cairo, and I'm here for the Cairo phase of our Basketball Africa League, which is the NBA's new international league, the first time we've done a league outside of North America. And in conjunction with FIBA, which is the International Basketball Association, we have started a league to really provide a unique opportunity for professional basketball players in Africa to play the game at the highest level. This year, we've already played games in Dakar, Senegal. We're playing in Cairo, Egypt over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll play in Kigali in Rwanda later in May. For me, Alpha has been an integral part of my career in the NBA. I joined the NBA about 2 years ago after a career in banking, and was warmly welcomed by the Alpha brothers who work in the NBA, in the NBA League office. One of my colleagues who runs Alpha in Europe, the NBA in Europe, is also an Alpha. And together, as we build the NBA's brand overseas, we are conscious about what we do in terms of providing service, especially to youth across the continent, and giving them opportunities in education and in sports to that they may not otherwise have had access to. Also, very conscious of the opportunity to spread the game internationally, especially on this continent of Africa. And as I do so, engaging with and being supported by Alpha Brothers in Africa, as well as in the broader international spheres, who have been very supportive of what we're doing here, and who continue to provide moral and emotional support to help us in growing the game of basketball across the continent of Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. So let's jump into some of the heavy stuff. There's been a lot of questions about ownership. We had the fiasco with Coach Flores down in Florida with the owner of the Dolphins. We had a similar instance in the NBA with those sorts of crude remarks and things like that, and with the Clippers and the change of ownership. And we have a unique group here. We have two current executives, along with a former executive, two former players, somebody that communicates what's happening to the rest of the world, and the glue in between, and Brother Fedlam, who is helping folks transition from amateur into professional, and those worlds all collide. So as we talk about athlete empowerment, can you share with us your definition of athlete empowerment? And are there areas where you believe athletes are actively being disempowered? Let's start with Brother Williams first on this one. Athlete empowerment and ways in which you think that there folks may be actively working against that.
Well, I tell you, there have never been more opportunities financially for athletes in all the world of sports. You know, the amount of appreciation of salaries is phenomenal. And now that we have, you know, name, image, and likeness coming up, you're going to have high school kids who are now going to be recruited by schools and be offered, as they are now, millions of dollars individually. And, you know, I tell you, if I was, like I said, I was told by Bo Schembechler and others that I wasn't good enough, you know, to play in his college, much less being good enough to be an NFL player. So athletes now are much more empowered financially to dispute that person, you know, by virtue of the economic marketplace. My concern about the allocation of huge sums of monies in individual pockets rather than to the whole team is just ensure that everyone gets their health coverage. You know, the one thing that I had to fight through as an NFL player was all of the challenges with all of the injuries that I've had. And it was a fight with the NFL, and it's still a fight with the NFL. And so at this time, you know, your body and the sanctity of your mind is worth much more than the amazing dollars that are being thrown around in the marketplace right now.
Thank you, Brother Williams. Brother Fedlam.
Absolutely. This is where I start to get fired up, because we are absolutely seeing this time of just the absolute most empowerment the athletes have ever had from an economic perspective and just an agency perspective, right? Of their own agency, the right. I mean, think about this. In July 1st of 2021, the NCAA finally got out of the way and allowed for student athletes to earn compensation off of their name, their image, their likeness. It's our name, it's our image, and it's our likeness, and yet they were not able to earn compensation. This isn't about pay for play where a college is paying a student athlete directly. This is about a student athlete being able to say, I want to have a contract with some other company over here so that I can make money because you all have been making money off of me for decades, right? So this time is a significant time. Quick facts. So if we look back to the first athletic scholarships offered at college, it was in the early 1950s, right? At the same time that was the same year, 1952, that there was the first television contract that broadcast football. It was on NBC. It was a one-year football deal. It was worth $1.14 million. And if we look at the change in media economics since 1952 till now, it's $1 billion plus every single year just for March Madness. But the only change to college student athletes and what they've been able to earn was this, some fringe benefits around the idea of cost of attendance, stipends, and things like that until July 1st of last year. But let's now couple that with the other changes that we've seen in terms of the transfer portal. And at the college level, we've had coaches been able to leave whenever they want to go to different teams and be able to start coaching right away. Finally, now we have the opportunity for student athletes to have that same right to be able to transfer and move and not have to sit out for a year and to be able to play. So the empowerment piece is big. But I'll tell you, because I'm getting that look, the RVP look of like, cut it short. The last thing I'll say along those lines is, we know, because you asked about disenfranchisement. The NCAA has fought name, image, and likeness all the way. They've fought it the entire way. And so they are fighting to try to stay relevant and to try to stay alive. So from a disenfranchised perspective, we still see that. Even though we're seeing some of the greatest changes recently, it's not without a fight.
Church. So I mentioned Brother Robert Frederick Smith's remarks last night. And there's two things that Brother Fedlam just mentioned that he said directly. He said, everything will come with a fight. And he talked about the infrastructure that systems, institutions, and the people behind those systems and institutions built, and that we as African Americans, people of color, trying to access those systems, those ways and those inroads and that infrastructure would not come without a fight. So what you just described was the same thing that Brother Smith just described. And I'm sure that as our brothers virtually take their turn, they see the same thing. So let's go in reverse order. Brother Williams, can you talk a little bit about athlete empowerment? How does that look on the international stage? Drop some knowledge on that, Brother Williams.
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting issue. It's I would say internationally, we're not yet at the place where things are in the US. So generally the game's not very, or just beyond basketball, sports here is certainly on the continent of Africa is not as professional, and it doesn't attract the same level of sponsorship and dollars that it does in the US. So here the challenge is really helping to make the game more professional, and to ensure that the clubs, working with the clubs to become more professional. So the ones that are participating in our league, we work with them to ensure that the athletes are getting paid well, to ensure that the athletes are getting, good access to care if and when they become injured. And that's the battle right now. The developments in the US, I think, are important because they impact those highly touted prospects that are coming from Africa and that are in demand by US colleges and universities. And so the more the game, the more opportunities there are for athletes to capitalize on their talent in the US, the more we'll see talented kids from Africa make their way to the US and show up in US colleges and universities to participate in those opportunities. But I would say for the majority of the kids and the professional players developing on the continent, we still have a ways to go to make similar opportunities available to them here.
Thank you. Um, Brother Harris, why don't you talk a little bit to us about how you've seen this evolve, because you've had to research it, follow it, and ultimately talk about it in front of a camera. Tell us what you see, your unique experience.
I think it's fantastic. We live in an era of unprecedented economic opportunity and power and empowerment for these athletes in these various sports. From what I see, all of that comes with great responsibility. I mean, when I read stories about athletes, when I convey stories about athletes, it's really cool when they have the right people around them, when they're properly educated on the subject they're talking about or the things that they're involved in, and when their communication skills are up to par. It bothers me when those things aren't there. So in this era of great empowerment, as long as they're serious about the business of the business and take the responsibility to do the ancillary things that make their presentation up to par, it makes my job a lot easier. I have, and I won't stop, going behind the scenes and, plugging somebody on the coattails and say, hey, maybe we should say it like this as opposed to like this. It makes a little better presentation. I've done that since I've been a journalist. You could call it activist journalism. I don't mind, but if I want to interview somebody, I'm going to make sure I put their best foot forward so they don't look silly.
That's that alpha. That's that alpha right there. That's that alpha. That's great. Brother Wright, round us out on this one. Athlete empowerment. How you seen it in your world? Your world gets a lot of attention, good brother. You are it's the Dada. You walked around. You walked around with without a formal name for quite a while, and have a very high profile team owner in Chocolate City. So tell us about that experience and how it relates to empowerment and or disempowerment.
Yeah, I'd say athlete empowerment has evolved a ton since I was a player. First and foremost, as most of you know, in their ability to drive dialogue on the most important issues facing our nation and our world. Athletes, male and female, drove dialogue on race relations that were well overdue in this country by decades. And so the power is there. The power of the platform and the pulpit, so to speak, is there and has been there. And athletes are really sophisticated in that. They know how to leverage their voice. They know how to talk through social media. They know how to link arms with folks like Brother Harris to tell their stories. Where I see the next level coming and where there are hindrances to them having the full impact is that most brothers are still using their capital when it goes from dialogue to having impact on the community. They're starting their foundation, they're doing their camp, they're doing this. But what I have seen business leaders do, and especially business leaders that don't look like us do, they use other people's money for that. And what I think young athletes need to learn is to leverage their power in the moment to get corporations, to get organizations, to get true high net worth individuals, not the money that we get in athletics. There's a different level that should be investing in these causes, to learn how to use that infrastructure and that system to further their aims. And one of my goals as president is to help put some of that infrastructure around our players and tap them in to those broader sets of wealth. So for example, when our players came out of, I guess it was 2020, and they wanted to do something in the community around social justice and policing practices, rather than just stop with their social media campaign, blagging out your Instagram, whatever it is that grows good awareness. We said, let's put some real meat behind this. Actually, a brother of mine, my line brother Michael Blake, helped me to organize community conversations around DC, Maryland, and Virginia with local police forces, our players, and community leaders. The net result of those conversations was they together took legislation to the Virginia legislature that got passed into law. Police reform law got passed in Virginia due to the work that our guys did alongside community leaders and law enforcement leaders. Then they went and did it again in Maryland. And as it passed the House of Delegates in Maryland, Chase Young was the guy testifying on the House floor in support of that bill as it passed. That's the broader infrastructure. That's the broader power that our guys don't normally tap into. And that's the next evolution in athlete empowerment. And we're going to do our part at the Commanders to actually put that structure around them so they can tap into it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so I'm going to break some of these questions up so we can cycle through quite a few. The next one, I'm going to come back to Brother Wright. And this is for Brother Wright and Brother Harris. We'll do Brother Wright first. Brother Wright, student athletes are beginning to prioritize HBCUs. And, you know, from your perch, what do you think that means for your industry, in particular, the NFL, and then as a whole, the sports world?
I think it's a huge move that can really be game changing. Just as we've been talking about the game changing nature of name, image, likeness and compensation for young men, I think this could swing the power of media dollars and attention in a different direction if folks are moving to HBCUs at scale. I think it can shift everything. Now, what it shifts for us is it means that we got to pay attention to these universities, to these colleges, to these pro days that we might not have been paying attention to before. Now, we uniquely have paid attention for some time. You know, Doug Williams, the first Black Super Bowl winning quarterback, is an advisor to me, has been in the organization for some time. So even predating me, there's been attention from our franchise on HBCUs because he's a Grambling grad, right? And to that point, you know, the NFL just started a new program to have coaches come from Black coaches in the offensive meeting room. That's a new internship program, a fellowship program that the NFL created. Well, you know, our aim is to say, okay, well, how do we actually do that with an HBCU? So we step right into the talent pipeline and support whatever we pull from an HBCU. We actually refund that role so that they can get the next person in that role, and we can develop a pipeline from those schools. So we've been thinking about it from both a coaching talent and player talent standpoint for some time. But as guys go there, everybody's attention is going to go there. And again, if they go at scale, the media dollars will follow. And that's a desperate need for HBCUs. Chronically underfunded. They are still the best indicator of social elevation for Black folks. The Black middle class was and is created by HBCUs. And so as money starts to flow in that direction, it can change the game. So I don't know. We need to have a sidebar conversation outside of this of how brothers in this room who have influence in that space accelerate that transition, because I think it could be game changing.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Brother Harris, from your perch, you've been able to witness this energy and then again communicate it out to a very large audience. Tell us about that.
I think it's everything that Brother Jason just said, because we are in the business of telling stories, and wherever that story may be. So it doesn't matter if it's at a PWI or an HBCU, but the fact that there are more stories coming out of HBCUs now, there are more eyes on HBCUs, I think it's fantastic. As a child of a mom who went to an HBCU, Hampton University, she would say, the real HU. Howard folks, don't at me. Talk to my mom, okay? But if you do, you better come correct. She's 85 and feisty, just letting you know. So I think the more attention on these HBCUs, the better, because it not only elevates it from the outside, but it makes people feel on the inside like, you know what? We need to up the ante around here. We need to up the infrastructure and spend some money and tap into our alumni and our donor base and make this really an attractive place for these young athletes to come. So it's a win-win all the way around. I hope it continues. It is not just a phase, because we've seen phases, and I hope this one sticks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Brother Harris. I'm going to talk to my brothers on the stage for a second here, and then we'll go back to Brother Williams over in Cairo. Growing up, I learned how to play the game of basketball mainly with a hoop in my backyard from instruction from my father who played college ball as well, and on the playground with older men that beat me up to make me tough and to help develop skills. I went to some skills camps and things of that nature, but this universe of AAU, every weekend travel sort of amateur experience for children is something that is foreign to me. And maybe it's because I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and not a larger city, but I, in my eyes, see an explosion in this space. So I'm gonna go to Brother Reggie Williams first as the builder and of the Disney-wide world of sports, which help facilitate a lot of the amateur athletic activities. Can you tell me what you saw while you were in that role and how you see the future of amateur athletics, especially if you could talk about it from the parents that are paying a lot to have their kids injected into that system?
Well, there's nothing that has demonstrated the power of sports in America than the tremendous growth of sports complexes throughout the world, but especially in the United States. When I was hired by Walt Disney in 1993, there were only really two major sports complexes in the world, unless you're on a college campus or whether you had an Olympic facilities. And that was what we tapped into. We actually did move the AAU from Indianapolis to Walt Disney World to facilitate the tremendous growth in team sports and travel sports, the amount of money that parents will spend in getting their kids as much coaching and instruction. And kids are learning so much earlier about nutrition and learning so much more about conditioning and strength training. And so we were able to build all of those assets in one unique location. Then from the business standpoint, we were able to support Wide World of Sports because we would funnel them into the hotels that we owned. We would funnel them into the restaurants that we owned. We would funnel them into the merchandise that we created. We would funnel them into the kind of visibility that was attractive to sponsors. And so all of those also contribute to their need to be entertained, and then you could sell them tickets to one of our 4 or 5 parks at Walt Disney World. So all of those assets really put power into the AAU, put power into these amateur coaches, and put power into the young athletes who are competing now. And I can tell you the AAU is really the grassroots emporium of the talent that's in the NBA. There's so many grassroots talent that comes out of it. And so by tapping into sports complexes, you're able to build these regional powerhouses that ultimately ended up in a national referendum on the growth of sports for amateur athletes.
All right, Luke, because I know this is your world, so you got it.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying there's nothing amateur about youth sports anymore, right? Let's start with that as a foundation. If you look at the facilities, if you look at the amount of money that is put in, the reason why AAU basketball becomes this grassroots feeder to the NBA, you look at the amount of money that organizations put into AAU sports, it's incredible, right? Whether you're talking EYBL, Peach Jam, etc. You go to these tournaments and it's unbelievable. But here's the thing, and I think when we look at just this growth, it goes even just beyond AAU. We now have OTE from Overtime Elite, which is where you can have high school basketball players who are getting paid. They're playing professionally at that 16, 17-year-old level. You've got, the G League has the Professional Pathways program with Team Ignite. So now you can go that direction instead of necessarily going to college and then onto the pros. There's a lot of changes that have happened. And part of that is because of this athlete empowerment movement. But here's where I start to get on my soapbox around all of this, which is we in this room and those who care about the development of leaders, right? It ultimately comes down to we have to make sure that the families of these youth athletes, these young athletes, are getting the education necessary to be able to successfully navigate what we're seeing happen every single day. Because I will tell you, I'm fortunate. I love what I do. I love what I do. I love waking up every single day and getting to do the work that I get to do, because as a non-agent sports attorney, I have no dog in the fight other than to say I want to make sure that my clients are protected. So when I talk to parents of elite athletes, they are typically getting their education and information by people who are impacted by the outcome of the decision that that family makes, right? So it's the agent trying to tell them you should do this because it ultimately is going to benefit that agent or whomever. We have to make sure that we're delivering the education necessary. Name, image, and likeness creates an opportunity to use this platform where athletes can get paid to start teaching things like financial literacy, about understanding contracts, about what is due diligence and how do I need to know how to investigate or analyze the people who want to work with me? How do I make a decision in life? That's where we can impact these young people. It's through the education, because with the more empowerment, the more opportunity they have, the more opportunity that they have responsibilities and they can be taken advantage of. And we've got to make sure that we're protecting them, and the protection comes through the education.
Absolutely. Brother Williams, Victor Williams, something that's happening on the international stage that we're paying a little bit of attention to here in the States is around Brittany Griner and her arrest, and she could be placed in prison for up to 10 years. How is that being covered in Africa? And do you think there's a double standard in media coverage as it relates to women athletes in this regard, and in general, just trying to see there's been a tremendous growth in women in athletics, but this is drawing some clear attention to it. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. Look, I mean, there's been some coverage, probably not as much as the US, because I think she is much better known in the US than she is on the continent. But I think to the general point, there's clearly a lot of opportunity to focus on women's athletic and to grow that side of our game. In Africa, it's actually not historically been the case that girls and women participate in sports. And so when we were forming the Basketball Africa League as part of NBA Africa, one of the commitments we made was that we were going to increase opportunities for women in on the court and off the court roles. So, for example, in our youth programs, our ambition is to get those programs to be 50-50 boys and girls. And ever since we made that commitment, we're starting to see, growth in the proportion of girls that are participating in our camps. And we're just excited that those girls are playing alongside boys and getting the opportunity to show what they can do. We're also very pleased to see progress in what we would call on-court authority roles. So, for example, last year at Basketball Africa League, we believe it was the first time we had female referees officiating a men's professional game. We had female match commissioners running the scorers table and everything associated with the game. We had female broadcast commentators and color analysts. And those things may be more usual in the US. In Africa, they were still, groundbreaking. And we certainly want to continue to push for greater inclusion of women and girls in sports and create more opportunities for them and increase the coverage for their successes and make people more aware that this is something that's happening and make it a normal part of the sports landscape.
Absolutely. as a girl dad and an observer, I've seen that the space has become more intense. And I think about what my 3-year-old daughter is. She might want to play sports. I notice she likes to write with her left hand and might shoot a left-handed jumper. That'd be nice. Balance the court. But I certainly want us all to pay attention as we're looking from a cultural and racial perspective, and we also need to examine this from a gender perspective to see how things are moving so that we can be influential in whatever space that is. I want to pose a question to the group as a whole as we get into our lightning round. But one thing that we did talk about in our preparation meeting is to address ways in which brothers can engage career-wise. So for a college brother looking to begin their career in some lane in sports that you might have influence in or specific knowledge about, or an alumni brother looking to transition careers into your world, what advice can you give them? Let's start with Brother Fedlin.
Absolutely. And first and foremost, I'd be remiss. I serve as chapter president for Alpha Rho Lambda chapter. I know some of my brothers are tuning in. So shout out to my Alpha Rho Lambda brothers in Columbus, Ohio. To get to your question, so what you can do, I think, is be a student of the industry. Know what's happening in the industry. So when I started off as a lawyer, I had already served in the financial world and worked with professional athletes on the financial side before I transitioned into law school. So my first day at a law firm after I left law school, I was the least experienced lawyer, but I had probably at that firm the most experience in understanding the unique complexities that professional athletes face. So I was able to lend my perspective, even though I didn't have the legal perspective. So I could learn that legal, but I could still add value on knowing what was going on in the industry. So I always encourage young people that when you think about the change going on, even just in college sports right now, transfer portal, name, image, and likeness, betting on sports and sports gambling, esports, the list goes on and on. There is significant change happening. Be an expert, be a student of the industry. And then no matter what particular profession you want to follow, you'll have that perspective and you can lend your perspective to that.
Absolutely. And I want college brothers that just heard that remark to focus on that esports piece. That is a huge growth market. I just left employment with the State University of New York, and there's a specialized esports program inside of the SUNY system. And I know that Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute has some really big stuff with esports from a tech perspective and design perspective. It's a huge emerging thing. And they broadcasted on ESPN. It's big. It's big.
And
Brother Reggie.
And esports athletes don't get hurt, That's one of the benefits. It is a high growth sport. And getting back to the original question, when I was running Walt Disney World, that's one of the ways that we brought in talent for people who wanted to get into the sports industry was through a variety of internship programs. And so that is probably one of the best things for college students to really identify. Our sports internship program really focused in on hiring students that went to a sports graduate program. In that regard, you sort of had an inclination to believe that they were serious about the industry, that they had spent time and resources to gain more knowledge and education in the industry, and that they were candidates that we could interview because they had knowledge about what we were looking for as an employer. So internships are probably the best initial step for college students to really get into the sports industry. It's a very, very difficult, challenging industry to get into, I will say.
Just one thing to add to that too. So internships now, great point. And because the world has become so comfortable with Zoom and virtual, we have interns that we work with every year, that we work with year round. So feel free to reach out to me. But now there are companies too that allow for that virtual space. So you might be here in the Eastern region, but working with a company and interning, in another location. So definitely feel free to reach out on that.
Absolutely. Brother Wright, college
I'll
brothers
first
looking
echo
to
what,
enter. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I'll echo what Brother Fedlin said. And he keeps hitting on an important theme in this, and that is the gap in intellectual capital that exists between folks in the infrastructure, in the good old boys network, and us. And so as you can educate yourself, I just want to double stamp that one as much as possible. Learn, learn, learn. Be a voracious reader of Sports Business Journal, of Front Office Sports. Like, get into the weeds, unsexy stuff about sports business, and you're going to be set up for success. So he's spot on with that. Secondarily, I want to call attention to something that we don't often talk about, but there's a real structural issue in place, especially for Black folks in breaking into sports. The big thing no one wants to talk about is that sports is a lower paid industry, especially at entry levels, whether it's on the coaching side, the sales side, et cetera. People take a discount on their market value to be around a game they're excited about, et cetera. And it's especially true in the NFL. And what that pay disparity does is it disadvantages Black folks because we don't typically have the same family wealth to lay back on when we're trying to get our careers started. We don't have an uncle or so-and-so who's going to pay our light bill or whatever it is. Typically, we're the ones supporting our family if we have a steady job, right? And so there's an actual structural issue that is in place. And so for those who are trying to go into sports, until those structural issues are solved, and those are not for you to solve, it's for folks like me and others to think about and solve. And I don't have the answers. But as you're thinking about it, prepare yourself financially to endure that grind. Because I have seen some of the top talent on the coaching side, on the business side, tap out because they just can't make the dollars meet, can't balance the checkbook at the end of the day. But if you have a plan heading in, knowing there's a 4-year grind at lower pay, you're going to share a room, like it's a mission. Then you're going to set yourself up for success and actually allow your talent to flourish rather than worrying where your next meal is coming from, et cetera. And it's a piece of sports we don't talk about enough, and it's going to have to change if we're going to see Black folks in leadership positions at scale.
Thank you, Brother Wright. That's an excellent point. And for the brothers in the room here in the Eastern region, I mean, something that we could think about as a fraternity is helping to build that fraternal infrastructure via housing and sharing rooms and helping to have economies of scale so that our young brothers that want to get into those spaces that don't have that generational wealth can actually tap into their fraternal network to help get their footing that Brother Wright just mentioned. So Brother Jay Harris, tell us a little bit about how college brothers looking to begin their careers or alumni brothers transitioning can step into your world. I'll say it again, Brother Harris. College brothers.
Well, since I see I'm on the screen, I assumed you. Oh, there we go. I can hear you now. Ask the question again. I couldn't hear you for a second.
I'll ask it again. Leaning into how.
Okay. You're gone again.
Uh-oh.
Tell you what I'll do. I'm gonna just talk. Since we're talking about
seasoned broadcaster
careers and getting into our various businesses, I'm gonna piggyback off of what Jason just said. My first job in radio, I worked for free because I needed to get in. And fortunately, I had a mom and dad who said, if that's what you want to do, we'll float you for a little bit. We'll take care of you. And I was very fortunate in that respect. So, and one thing I learned from that is that if I'm going to succeed in this business, I have to get my basics down. I have to learn how to write. I have to learn how to tell a story. I have to learn how to interview. I have to learn the basics of journalism. I think, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, social media gives us this access to folks and the ability to do things that some of us really shouldn't have and shouldn't do. to be totally honest with you, because it creates these visions of shortcuts. People ask me all the time, give me some hot tips to get into the field and give me something that I can make myself stand out. I'm like, do your job. Learn your craft. That will make you stand out. That will help you along the way. Because I can put a microphone in your hand, but if you can't take some information and create a story out of it, if you can't go to somebody, if you can't walk up to Mr. Jason Wright and say, excuse me, may I interview you, and ask him competent questions so he doesn't roll his eyes and walk away from you, then you're not any good to me. You're not any good to the field. So if you want to be a journalist, you have to start out being a journalist and learning your craft from the bottom up. And I want to segue a little bit, if you don't mind, to go back to something we were just talking about. Because while we were talking, I did a little Googling. I just want to make sure about the Brittany Griner situation. I think, and I'm going to take you behind the curtain. We have this discussion in the newsroom a couple of times a week. We want to do more. I'm sure other media outlets want to do more, but there is a school of thought amongst the political experts, the governmental experts, that the more mass media push on this, the more attention on this is the worse for her. So it's kind of walking a fine line. Her family is asking for privacy as they behind the scenes try to work out something, but she's not the only American being detained in Russia right now. And you don't hear a lot about the other stories either, because again, the school of thought that less is better when it comes to media attention. And she is a tall, black, gay woman in Russia. So there are a lot of different things going on with her case. I just wanted to put that in.
Excellent perspective, and thank you for that. Brother Williams, how can we get some young folks to come over and work with you across the continent of Africa?
Well, we're always looking for talent. So I think, we have some opportunities. So for example, when we do our Basketball Without Borders camp, we've historically seen some young people from the US come over and assist in that. And historically, that has led to many of those people have fallen in love with the continent of Africa and have then sought opportunities with NBA Africa. We got some issues in some of the places we operate in terms of getting work permits and the like that need to get navigated. But in general, we're open to talent that is willing to, come in and be on the ground and help us operate and grow, because we're definitely in growth mode. I would say at the alumni level, everything the brothers said earlier applies. I think you got to be a student of sports industry. You got to be up to date with some of the key trends. I think if you're a career changer like I was, you got to be able to tell the story about the skills that you learned in whatever it is you were doing before and why those translate into the particular sports realm or field or league that you're trying to get into. And how are you going to add value relative to people who've been doing this for many years already? And so you got to be able to bring what is your unique value add to the table and make people be aware of it. And then finally, I got to say, at all levels, you got to have passion. You got to be resilient. This is an exciting industry, but it's also a tough industry. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and at every level, you got to put in a lot of hours to be competitive. And if you don't have the passion and the commitment, then it's going to be challenging. But if you have the love for what you're doing, then I think you put in the effort that makes you eventually succeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brothers in the room here, please give our panelists the alpha round of applause. Oh, 6.
Oh, thanks.
Brothers, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming to contribute your knowledge. There's not often that we have the opportunity to gather as brothers and take a deeper dive into topics that we may only have cursory knowledge of. This is how we write the next chapter of Alpha. So to Brother Williams in Cairo, Brother Harris up east, up in Connecticut, and Brother Wright down in DC, thank you for working with us and helping us test out this technological transformation that we've just made here in Alpha East. This is, you may not realize this because you all do this every day, but this was really, really big for us. There's a lot of people who are stressed out behind the curtain back there trying to make sure that you all are able to be seen and be heard. And I would say we did a fairly, very, very good job with that. Brother Fedlam, thank you for flying in from Columbus via Tennessee to be here with me. This is my man, and Big Brother Reggie for driving up from Orlando and sharing your story. Brothers, this does not the end of this conversation. It's the beginning, because our goal is to follow up with each one of these panelists and bring in others. We didn't even touch on sports where Black males and Black folks are no longer dominant or not dominant. We didn't talk about lacrosse. We didn't talk about baseball. We didn't talk about some of the other things that are around this industry. So what we want to do is follow up on Zoom and in virtual spaces with these brothers if they have that time to go in depth. So we're rounding out this portion of the Eastern Region Convention, and I thank these brothers for spending the last hour with us. I am truly grateful. We totally admire you and all of the work that you do and have done, and we look forward again to helping, working with you to write Alpha's next chapter. Thank you, brothers. The next session will start at noon, and we'll have a presentation from BizGrow in this office. Thank you, brothers. Take care.